The League of Legends World Championship is the tournament in League of Legends throughout the whole calendar year. It's the premier tournament. It's the one that matters the most. It has the most historical context to it, debatably, but in general, that's the consensus. That's the prevailing paradigm that we exist within. And nothing else can be allowed to stand against it, but nothing else can stand against it realistically. There can't be other smaller international tournaments due to rights restrictions and the way they balance out the rest of the year that can match up to it in terms of scale or prestige or even competition level of the teams competing. Now, you could make a case that LPL and LCK, the Chinese and Korean leagues, are better in some regards, such as the high level of competition team for team, parity of competition among the group, a number of high-level matches played. There's different areas you could, but even so, they lack the international flavour. You don't have as much diversity in terms of the pools of different meta games all coming into one, the clashes of different styles. It's not quite as widespread a spectrum within those regions as it is for the entire world as a whole. And you don't have the same calibre of international type names battling each other. So, being as it is the tournament, and that can't really too far be debated beyond minor points or tertiary components, it's important that it's done well. In fact, I'd go further and say it's important that as much thought and care and attention is placed on making this tournament the best it possibly can be. And that means you start with the format of the tournament, how you structure it, how you schedule it, how you seed it, what the policies and the rules are going to be, because the other factors, how great a game is, how awesome the storylines of how many teams get so far, those can all be randomized to a degree, or rather at the whims of the fates, as it were, where no matter how great a tournament you set up, you could still have a lot of things fucked. But the more care and attention you put into these fundamentals and the basic structure of how the tournament is, the more likely you are to have the good storylines, to have the great matches, to have great opportunities, a stage set for people to showcase the best skills and the best games of the year on, potentially, which is what I'm sure many of us would like to see. Well, the reason I make that point, that it's so important that this emphasis be placed on it and that we have this expectation that it all be done wonderfully and to a very high degree, is because if we were in a tournament circuit where there were many, many international tournaments, then there could be international tournaments run which featured formats that I'm not a fan of, or that I think are gimmicky, or that favour one type of a team over another unduly. And it wouldn't be as big a deal because those would be one-off tournaments, or they'd be lesser tournaments, or there'd be options. People would have the option to not watch that one, or to not care that much about it, or they get to see what they want elsewhere, and there'd be some diversity via different tournament formats. Even so, Worlds, as the World Championship, as billed as the big be-all and end-all for the year, should still be going towards this high-level, extremely fair, open system where you can just see the best teams and the best teams play, regardless of region and all the rest, just who plays the best gets to go the furthest and win. And that's where I see some severe flaws with the World Championship system for League of Legends. And it's the system that's been employed as of last year, which is the pool system for seeding. Now, essentially, they will tell you, in general, that there isn't really a seeding system. There's the pools, where there's 3 pools and all the teams are divided up into the pools, but they're not specifically seeding. And if you were to seed, obviously there'd be personal choice involved, preference, there'd be individual bias of what you think makes a better team over a better team. But you have to realize, first and foremost, as we get into this topic, pool system is seeding. It's just a very limited, quite basic, not very nuanced seeding system. And whenever you're talking about seeding, you want to be as specific as you can be to make it as fair as possible, because then when you divide up by the seeds, you're going to get the most reasonably balanced tournament groups, which are then going to lead to good chances for the better teams to all move on if they can play better through the tournament, and the best teams overall to be reflected in their placing and how far they go, and to have the proper teams match up later in the tournament. The worse a job you do, the more basic, less nuanced, less complicated, less well thought out seeding system you have, the more chances for wild upsets, which may initially have a novelty or a thrill factor to the fact that lesser teams won, but actually will spoil the rest of the tournament. They'll make it so that the playoff part of the tournament, where you're having these awesome best of fives between top teams, which is really what we come to see. The group stage system is just to eliminate half the teams and get us to that point in time where we're seeing the awesome teams match up. You're now allowing what should be the least important part of the tournament, the group stage, to overwhelm, to overshadow, to dominate the way the rest of the tournament plays out in a manner where very minor results here, because of a group that's too stacked or one that's not stacked enough, or some weird placing where you won't put a certain region together, then allows teams to get through to the playoffs, which almost certainly wouldn't have in other circumstances, and then messes up where they meet in the bracket and just spoils the overall affair, because it means that everything has to go perfectly almost to work within this system, whereas there are better systems in place which would allow more chances for great matchups to happen and the right sorts of teams to be allowed the reasonable chances to get out without undue biases for certain regions, which is what exists right now. It's not that this system's unbiased. It's actually inherently biased for certain regions, and it just does so in the name of uniformity, but by not having that nuance, it actually is itself biased for those regions, as I'll outline. Now, first and foremost, as I get into this system, I'll explain some of the flaws of seeding here. But I'll start out by just explaining what this system is currently like. So there's 16 teams at Worlds, and they are divided up into 3 pools. Pool 1 is the number 1 seeds from the 4 major regions. So that's the number 1 seed from Europe, Fnatic, the number 1 seed from North America, CLG, the number 1 seed from China, LGD, and the number 1 seed from Korea, SK Telecom. 4 teams in Pool 1. Pool 2 has 8 teams in it and features the number 2 seed from NA, TSM, the number 2 seed from Europe, H2K, the number 2 seed from China, EDG, the number 2 seed from Korea, Ku Tigers, number 1 seed from LMS, AHQ, number 2 seed from LMS, Flash Wolves, number 3 seed from China, Invictus Gaming, number 3 seed from Korea, KT Rolster. There's 8 teams there, and so 2 teams, I'll go into that about later actually. Pool 3 has 4 teams in the last 4, and that's number 3 seed from Europe, Origin, number 3 seed from North America, Cloud9, International Wildcard, Turkey qualifier winner, Bangkok Titans, International Wildcard, Chile qualifier winner, Pain Gaming from Brazil. Now, those 3 pools, 1 team is drawn from Pool A to go in a group, 2 teams are drawn from Pool B to go in a group, and 1 team is drawn from Pool 3 to go in a group. So a group is made up of a Pool 1 team, 2 Pool 2, and 1 from Pool 3. And that's how you get your 4 teams. So in itself, if you didn't look at the names involved in these pools, you can see what they're trying to do. Whoever's a number 1 seed, they're ensuring you can't play another number 1 seed in the group. Whoever's a number 2 seed, because there's so many of you and you're not terrible and you're not the best, you're going to make up the majority of the people who are in the pools of the groups, and then one of the worst teams, the Pool 3, are all going to be in each group. In isolation, before you put the names in, that doesn't sound like that bad a system. But the reason it doesn't sound like that bad a system is because it's so abstract at this point. It's just, and there'll be a top team, a bottom team, and some middle teams. Now that works in this world, because when I say a top team, there's no grading on that. All the top teams are all the same. All the top teams are the best teams. All the worst teams are all the worst teams. All the middle teams are all the middle teams. The problem is, in reality, in every single year you have a Worlds, there's going to be an incredible amount of difference and spectrum within each of those pools. So in Pool 1, the best team in Pool 1 is not going to be equal to the 4th best team in Pool 1, especially in this system. Likewise, in Pool 2, the best team in Pool 2, because there's 8 teams, can be massively far apart from the worst team, the 8th best team in Pool 2. In Pool 3, the best team there could be massively apart. And that is the case in all 3 of these pools, as we'll get to now. And that is one of the flaws, because by making those pools uniform and not having seeding within the pools, you've now actually created a scenario in which, because each pool is identical, you're essentially seeding those teams as identical and treating them as identical. And whether or not you yourself think that this team's as good or is better than one in the pool below it, you've now created a system in which it is. And so effectively, you have seeded certain positions higher than other ones. And that's what we're going to go through. There's also a secondary factor, which I'll get to later, which is that 2 teams from the same region cannot appear in the same group. Now, that in itself actually makes it even more critical that seeding is done very well, because by ensuring teams can't be in the same group just purely on the fact of where they come from, you, 1, make it easier for extremely weak groups to exist. Because, for example, what if all the teams from, I'll make it EU since everyone will get butthurt if I say NA, what if EU was super weak one year and they were dreadful and there wasn't even a good team there? But because you're not allowed to have more than one EU team in the same group, What if in reality they were some of the 6 worst teams in the group, all 3 of them were from Europe? Well, now some of them would artificially be getting placed in other positions in groups because there wouldn't be able to be 2 in the pool 3 in that scenario. Some of them would be artificially placed higher and given better seedings than otherwise. And to do so, since it's a limited format, it's like a zero-sum game essentially. That would mean you'd be punishing some other team who's better just on the basis that they're better but from a different region, and so they're allowed to be placed in the same group. So again, in theory, it sounds great, doesn't it? That, oh, well, we don't want 2 teams from China playing each other, we don't want 2 teams from NA play each other in the same group. Yeah, but that's the problem. You didn't ask us, but the option that we're going to give you now is that we can have totally fucked groups just so that they don't play each other. Well, now I don't think that many people would accept it. And sometimes, in terms of the seeding where they are in the world, probably some of those teams should be able to be in a group. Now, we don't want every team to be in a group. Okay, I could see some compromise there, but at the moment it's so extreme that, again, just for the sake of making these uniform seeds, we're saying that, we don't want them to be in the same group. Therefore, we're going to make EU team number 1 always equivalent to KR team number 1. We're going to make EU team number 2 always equivalent to KR team number 2. Well, no one would agree with that. I don't know anyone who thinks that that's a reasonable seeding system. And then because of the other aspect, they can't be in the same group. So it's even more critical with this system that you get it right. And that's why it's more of a flaw that there are these issues. So let's look at some of the problems with this pooling system. So essentially, like I said, the biggest problem first and foremost is that it makes teams equivalent in seeding that otherwise would never be. Like, no matter who you spoke to out of experts, you would never find an expert, a really knowledgeable person who's not well-known in the community, people that acknowledge this person knows a lot about the game. You'd never find an expert who would say that Fnatic and CLG are as good as LGD and SKT. I've never met anyone who'd do that. So even all the experts in the world, if we all made our list of seedings, okay, maybe I would have SKT number 1, but maybe Kelsey Moser would have LGD number 1. Maybe someone else might even say, hey, I think KT Rollstar has an outside chance of coming number 1. I'm going to actually have, not, or rather, they think they'll be the dark horse and that they're going to come through and they've got the style for it. Maybe they'd have KT Rollstar number 1. Key thing is, no one would have Fnatic or CLG number 1. Yet essentially, by having a random draw from a pool of those 4, which are identical, essentially, you're allowing Fnatic or CLG to be the number 1 seed by the way the pools play out. And you'll see if you put the numbers out that those are some of the possibilities for that case. No one would rank Fnatic or CLG number 1. So you're making Fnatic and CLG equal within this system. So you can already see how that's going to cause flaws. But that's just level 1. You get flaws in every other pool, pool 2 and pool 3. So not only is that a flaw of pool 1, that Fnatic and CLG are equal to LGD and SKT and are not treated any differently, then you've got the factor that because CLG and Fnatic, just from being number 1 in their regions, are then treated as though, well, number 1 in the regions equals and should be identical, treated identically to number 1 from the other regions, and ignoring who number 2 is, that means that CLG and Fnatic are ranked by the system and seeded above EDG and KT Rollstar. Now again, you'd be hard pressed to find experts who'd rank either of these teams above EDG and KT. Even in the odd cases they would. I don't know any expert who'd rank both of them above both of those elite level Asian teams. Then you look also, now let's go down to Pool 2. First things first, Pool 2 has way too many teams. It has 8 teams. Well, first of all, what are the odds that 8 teams in a world championship are going to be close and have parity? It's very unlikely. And even if it was the case, you'd still want proper seeding anyway. So the lack of seeding here is absolutely egregious. Because in this particular group setup, it literally means that we're saying that KT Rollstar is treated equally to Yowie Flash Wolves, to H2K. I mean, this is absolutely ludicrous. TSM. It's quite ridiculous, the idea that KT Rollstar, who's considered to be a strong team, is treated identically to Yowie Flash Wolves and H2K. That just doesn't hold any water whatsoever. It doesn't matter where they finish relative to their regions, because to finish in their regions, they only played their people from their regions, not each other. Therefore, you can't have an absolute system in that sense. It's actually very important in seeding that you forget about absolute abstract concepts and make it specific to how good these teams are, trying the best you can to get expert seeding, and that will make it the most fair, the most reasonable, the best chance for the best games. Fuck what region people are from. And so as a result, H2K and TSM in this system are equal to EDG and KT. There's also the factor that EDG is treated equally to Yowie Flash Wolves. We can see the massive problems that are going to happen here. So one person whose group is a super strong team They get someone from Pool 2. It could be Yowie Flashwolves. Wow, we've got one of the best ones. Identically, and with no rhyme or reason, just randomly, it could also be EDG. You can see the massive difference there in parity. Then you go down to the fact that in Pool 3, this is actually one of the most fucked pools rather. So Pool 1's really bad, in as much as I don't know anyone who thinks that they're equivalent. But Pool 3, this is absolutely egregious, because Origin is considered equal to Bangkok Titans and Pain Gaming. Now forget Pain Gaming a second. Bangkok Titans have never done anything internationally. There's no possible context in which you could argue they are as good as Origin or deserving of a seed even comparable to Origin's. Not only that, many people might even say Origin is better than some of the teams in Pool 2 if you were just to rank them purely on how good they seem actually beyond just the context of their region. They'd be considered very good. And yet they're equal to Bangkok Titans. You've got an equal chance of getting either. And then there's the factor that they're considered much worse in this seeding system than H2K, than Flash Wolves, than TSM, just on the basis that TSM plays in NA. So they automatically get a better seed than Origin. I mean, obviously there's the fact that Origin won the gauntlet. And I will throw in that, yes, it's true, Origin has kind of fucked Riot's system, because Origin came in not playing the spring split, and since there's a circuit point system, it's very unlikely they could have been number one without an insane performance. Therefore, they've sort of snuck in the back door as the best possible gauntlet team you could sort of have, which is true to a degree, but that doesn't matter. You could fix all of that by having reasonable seedings at the event. You don't have to set a system in place months before and then go, oh, that's a shame, something came through and fucked it all up. You can seed right now and do it correctly. All of this can be fixed overnight, but it won't be. So then you've got the fact that, to emphasize how bad this system is, I'll draw some groups that are actually possible and I'll obey all the rules. I'll take one team from Pool 1, two from Pool 2, and one from Pool 3. And I'll always keep the regions separate, and I'll show you how bad the draw could be based on the random element they're allowing to take place here. So these two groups can both exist and obey all the rules, and contrast how difficult one group would be compared to the other one. So Group A, I'm going to go ahead and try and make an easy group for you, okay? So from Pool 1, I'll pick CLG, who at the moment are considered the weakest of the Pool 1 teams. Pool 1, CLG, there we go. Pool 2, I'm going to take out H2K, who were actually the number 2 seed from Europe, but are considered the weakest of the 3 European teams. Everyone I know thinks Origin's better, and there's quite a lot of data to support that. Not least they beat H2K and they've repeatedly outperformed them, but they weren't there for the circuit points, and H2K had finished third in both seasons, therefore they progressed ahead in terms of circuit points. So at the moment we've got CLG, H2K, Yowie Flash Wolves from LMS, Taiwan region. There we go. Fourth team, Bangkok Titans. So my group is CLG, H2K, Yowie Flash Wolves, Bangkok Titans. You'll notice there's not a single Chinese team there. There's not a single Korean team there. And we've, in theory, got the worst Pool 1 team, the 2 worst Pool 2 teams, and the worst Pool 4 team. And as a result, we've made an incredibly easy group. And yet, let's go on to the next part. Let's go for the hardest possible group we can think of. So I'm going to go for this. SK Telecom from Group 1. Pool 1, I'll take SK Telecom. To allow me, in Pool 2, to take EDG. Many people think of as the best Chinese team, but actually made it through the regional, therefore they're in Pool 2. So we've got SK and EDG, number 1 and number 2, at least out of the top 3 favourites for the tournament, they are both top 4, and yet we've got both of them in the same group. The second Pool 2 team, I'm going to take TSM, one of the stronger teams, in theory, compared from the Western teams. And I'll just put that in there so there's not much argument. And the last team I'll take is going to be Origin for the 4th one. So remember, my first group, both these groups can exist at once, by the way. The first group was CLG, H2K, Yowie Flash Wolves, and Titan, where the favourites to get out of this group is going to be CLG almost definitely, and then Flash Wolves second. Meanwhile, the hardest group would be SKT, EDG, 2 of the favourites to win the tournament in one group. Then TSM, who in other groups would have a chance to get out in second, and Origin, who also would have a chance to get out in second in other groups, but in theory you're going to have no chance now with these extremely difficult teams. You can see there, it's not even close, is it? Group 1 that I made, Group A, is way, way easier than Group B in terms of how hard Group B is. It's incredibly hard. And that's one of the flaws as well. Because you didn't use a system in which Chinese and Korean teams could be just seeded based on how good they are, not the region they come from, you're setting up a scenario where you unfairly reward Western regions just for being Western regions over, and in doing so punish Asian teams for coming from the same country as another really good team. When in a normal system, there is almost no way you would have 4 groups that could have no Korean and no Chinese team in. Because in the system, in a seeding system where you're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, down to 16, it's almost impossible, obviously unless it was a terrible year, for there to be no Chinese or Korean team in any of the groups. There would be at least one in each of the 4 groups, because obviously you can have 1, 2, 3, 4. What are the odds that in the top 4, at least 3 aren't going to be Chinese or Korean? So there we go. And then the next ones, there's going to be no more Chinese and Korean. So obviously there's going to be more. So the idea that you can even have a group with no Chinese or Korean team shows how flawed this system is, because we know how good they are and how superior they are overall as regions. Now then, let's look at this aspect. Because one of the ways you could fix this if you're Riot. So presumably Riot don't want to go the seeding route, because again, they'll naively think, well, that allows bias and people will just be arguing over the rankings. But let's imagine we want to go and compromise for them and say, okay, you want this pool system with some random element in it still. So what we're going to do to fix that, well, the first things we can do first, I said how Pool 2 had way too many teams. We're going to fix that by making more pools. Now, I'm not sure how many pools you'd actually need or how the system would work, but just for the sake of argument here and just looking at the teams, I've tried to create what I think are quite reasonable pools by making 5 of them. And so what I've done here is I've made Pool 1. And since I know in general you want champions to be rewarded for as much, I'm going to go ahead and join champions and who people think are the best by saying Pool 1 is only LGD and SKT. And then I'm going to go ahead and say Pool 2 is going to be EDG, thought of a very strong KT, 2 of the outsiders with the chance to win there. And we'll say IG and KU, 2 Asian, 2 Korean, 2 Chinese. That'll be Pool 2. Pool 3, we'll say is TSM, H2K, AHQ and Flash Wolves. Because, okay, AHQ and Flash Wolves, their LMS has looked quite strong, actually. It's looked comparable to NA and EU, definitely, over the course of this year. Therefore, we'll say that they're at a similar level as the second seeds from EU and NA. And we'll say that that's a reasonable 4-pool group where no matter who you draw from there, it's a similar kind of level. Now, I think Origins is good or better than some of those teams, but we'll honour Riot's system again, where we don't reward, in theory, third place teams within their region of getting a higher seed than someone from their region in general. Like, they have the same one in some of my other pools, but they're not going to go above. So I'm going to put Pool 4, I'll put C9 and Origin there, and just say that they have their own pool. Now, Pool 5 is going to be Bangkok Titans and Pain, who are significantly worse than all the other teams. I mean, it's obviously debatable in terms of Pain and C9, because C9 have been so shaky in some degree, but we'll say in general they're a tier apart. Now, making this clear tier list, obviously you'd have to use seeding anyway within this tier, because since there aren't 4 teams in each group, you can't have all the tier 1 groups. So instead it would be something along the lines of, if you had tier 1 and tier 5 teams in the same group, then it would be made up with middling ones, tier 3 and tier 4 instead of tier 2. There's a seeding system you could design with this sort of a pool system to still make it fair, because then the groups that didn't have a tier 1 and tier 2 would have more of tier 2 and tier 3 to even it out in that sense. And in doing so, if you did it correctly, maybe you need another pool, I'm not sure. This has more nuance to it. It's getting closer to seeding without feeling, if you're Riot's case, like it's too biased or whatever. There's still some component of we can do a draw, but we're making it more reasonable in how the groups are going to play out. And we're giving these teams, we're not punishing them as much for coming from their region. Now, personally, I think you should just seed 1 to 16, because as you'll see, if you do so, you get much more reasonable groups. So what I did was I sat down first of all and I tried to seed 1 to 16 myself. And so I'll go from top to bottom, ascending order. I'll start at seed 1 and go to seed 16. So I'm personally, Thorin's ranking, putting seed 1, SK Telecom, the best Korean team, I think the best team in the world. Seed 2, LGD, impressive team from China repeatedly throughout the year. Seed 3, EDG, I actually think they're stronger than some of the other Korean teams, therefore I think they're a solid third. KT Rolster, I'll put them 4th. I think they've got a style that if it works, they can be very dangerous. KU Tigers, people underrate them because some of their players individually aren't so strong, but they find ways to make it work and to get to the point in the game where they can win. Seed 6, I'm going to be bold and actually give Fnatic this and say, hey, they've shown enough in their region that no one could really stop them in general. And I can't really say that like third seeds from some of the other regions in general are always more successful. Therefore, I'll put Fnatic 6th best. I'll have IG as 7th because they had an impressive regional run. They had some results in in LPL playoffs, obviously, but even so, they haven't shown me more than Fnatic overall, even though they won that best of 5 against EDG. Then I'll go CLG number 8, dominant within their region within this split. Ninth, I'm actually going to have Origin, because just in terms of how good they think the teams are overall, I think they've shown enough within their one split to show they're top 10, so ninth. 10, I'll have TSM, quality overall, shown the ability to win playoff series. Okay, some regular season issues, who cares? 10th best. 11, I'll have AHQ, they showed it in LMS, how strong they could be. I'll have number 12, Flash Wolves. Great performance at a number of tournaments throughout the year. I think they're a decent team, maybe not as good as AHQ, but they have their own strengths. 12, number 13, H2K, looked quite shaky in Europe, but they're sort of a European coup. They can get it together in some aspects. They're more than the sum of their parts. 14th, C9. Yes, they're not very good in many aspects. They've got many flaws. They're very flawed in terms of players as well, but they've got the clutch factor. They have shown good performances. They've shown that they've got something about them and that they can make noise in tournaments overall. So 14th. 15th, Pain. They were the best team in Brazil. They, in general, looked a class above a bunch of the other teams at the wildcard tournament. Last team, Bangkok Titans, they've shown me nothing. They're by far the worst team in this tournament. They would go 16th. Now, in a normal seeding system, you'd have something along the lines of this, okay? So Group A would be number 1 seed, number 16 seed, number 8 seed, and number 9 seed. So that's how it would go. And that would mean in my system, I'll just take those seeds and put them in here. That would mean Group A would be SK Telecom, a favourite to win the tournament. Bangkok Titans, the worst team in the tournament, so the best and the worst are already paired up. You'd have CLG, a decent chance to get out from the West, and you'd have Origin. So this is an ideal group, right? We've got one of the absolute best teams who've got a really good chance to get out. Bangkok Titans, almost no chance to get out, and they deservedly so, even less chance because they're getting the best team and 2 decent teams. And then we've got 2 decent teams battling for the second spot. CLG from NA and Origin from Europe. May the best man win. Reasonable group, right? Group B. So it's number 2 seed, number 15 seed, number 7 seed, and number 10 seed. So number 2 seed, LGD, favourite to win the tournament, favourite to get out of this group. Number 15 seed, Pain Gaming. Quite unlikely they can get out of this group. Would need a miracle against the second and third teams in this group. Unlikely it's going to happen, but they shouldn't probably be getting out. 7th seed, Invictus Gaming. One of the teams who have some upset potential, maybe an outside dark horse for the tournament. They're a team where now they've got a chance to battle to get out of this group in second, and the team they'll be battling probably, TSM, number 10 seed. They've still got a chance to get out of the group. If they beat IG and they beat Bangkok Titans, they're going to be able to get out. They've got a chance, but even so, it's difficult because they've got IG and they've got one of the best teams, so that's almost certain they're going to lose there, but that's what being the 10th seed gets you. There's another group, quite reasonably balanced again. Very strong favourite, very poor team, 2 teams in the middle who are going to battle for the second spot most likely. Group C. Number 3 seed, number 14 seed, number 6 seed, and number 11 seed. So, number 3 seed, EDG. Again, one of the now, because of their losses, a dark horse to win the tournament, but still among the favourites in general. One of the top teams in the world, especially over the year. Winner of MSI. Strong favourite to get out of this group. 14 seed, C9. They haven't really shown much beyond the gauntlet. We don't know what much on, but as a result, we can't really judge them off much more. Very unlikely they'll get out of this group, but let's see how they battle here. Number 6 seed, Fnatic. Considered a team who can make the top 8, maybe make a strong run to the semis. They're going to be battling to get out in second in this group. And 11th seed, AHQ, a team that have shown strength in their region. Their region overall isn't considered as good as some of the others, but they'll be battling Fnatic. They've got a chance to get out here. So we've got one of the almost favourites, EDG, therefore they don't get as easy a group in some senses. One of the almost worst teams, C9, and then we've got 2 teams in the middle, Fnatic and AHQ, who can both get out in second. But hey, maybe C9 have a little bit better chance to beat those middle 2 teams than they do some of the others, like AHQ. Maybe those second and third best teams, Fnatic and AHQ, have a slightly better chance to beat EDG than in some of the other groups where the number 1, number 2 seed were there, which is how it should be. That's how the balancing works. There's another evenly balanced group. Strong team, poor team, 2 middling teams. But it's getting closer because that's how seeding works. Last group, Group D. 4 seed, 13 seed, 5 seed, 12 seed. 4 seed, KT Rolster. Strong team, maybe had chances to win the Korean region, flopped in the final, but still strong overall, had some great performances throughout the season, considered another dark horse to win the title. They're going to get a group accordingly. 13th seed, H2K, shaky in their region, probably won't make it out of groups regardless. With this sort of a group, quite unlikely to. Should be in general battling for the worst spot. Number 5 seed, Coup Tigers. An outside now you're pushing Dark Horse a bit, but considered a team that have a chance to maybe go top 4, at least top 8. Good team overall, strong team in some senses, but they're going to be there with the 4th team. So now in this group, number 4 and 5 are in the same group. Therefore, they're going to be battling even for the first spot, which is as it should be, because 4 is weaker in this scenario than 3, 2, and 1. Naturally, they're going to be battling to a degree, but even so, they should be slightly lesser. Oh, wait a second, actually. Let me see. No, that's right, yeah, because in my system I'm allowed that. Anyway. Then we've got H2K. Did I do the last one? Flash Wolves is the 12th one. So, okay, obviously 12 and 13, they're going to be close to each other. It's not sure who will go out in last. 4 and 5 are close to each other. They're going to be battling for first. Is there really much of a battle between second and third teams, between Flash Wolves and Coup? Not so much, but there's still some chance for that Flash Wolves teams to overtake. So again, it's evenly balanced out. Now, what did I do that let me have these really great groups? Which I didn't design the groups. I just designed the system. I put the system all in place. I put everything out, and then I ran the numbers, and I got these awesome groups that I didn't personally pick who would be in each group. I didn't think in a head, well, if I put this one 8th seed, I could put them in this group. I didn't think that. Well, first of all, I seeded 1 to 16. And secondly, I took away the regional shit. So as a result, you've got groups like in Group B, LGD and IG are in the same group. But because it's reasonably seeded, they both have a chance to get out. You've got Group D, KT and Coup are in the same group, but again, they've both got a chance to get out because it's reasonably seeded. And yeah, those are the only egregious ones as far as I can tell. So one of the other points to make here as to why seeding by expert opinion is better than seeding by computer or by system and then doing it. The reason why is because people will say, right, humans have biases, they'll prefer one thing over the other. Problem is, that is inherently illogical when you consider, well, who programs the computer or the system? Who designs the system? A human. Well, then how does the system decide which qualities it prefers and criteria it does? Well, the human just decides which he does. Then he has the system work out where So you see the problem. The human biases towards which criteria should be valued more and how a system should be designed, like Riot's decisions, that you can't have the same teams in the same region, the same group, that you just make all the teams uniform in the pools, that you do it randomly in this order. All these components, that placing third in a region means you can't ever be considered the same rank overall as someone else who's worse overall, and that's not entirely true because Pool 2 is like that, but you make it a strict balance, whether it's too far apart and not enough parity in other senses. This aspect is their biases showing through in their system, which they claim they've designed, and it's not biased in that sense. I give this great analogy about this sort of seeding, okay? So this isn't purely random seeding because there are the pools, but within the pools, it's randomly seeded, right? So Pool 2 is the best example because in Pool 2, we have EDG and KT, but we also have Flash Wolves and H2K, who we know are a million miles apart. Now, here's the difference. If I got all the teams in Pool 2 and I tried to rank them all, so personally, if I look at Pool 2, I would rank them something like this. I would say the best one is, well, I already have it over here, don't I? So best one is EDG, then KT Roaster's the second best, then Coup's the third. Let me see, IG's the fourth, TSM's the fifth, AHQ's the sixth, Flash Wolves are the seventh, and H2K are the eighth. Now the difference is, if I do my 1 to 8 like that, and then you get another expert and he does a 1 to 8, let's say you get Monty and he does a 1 to 8, let's say you get Freak and he does a 1 to 8, let's say you get Jat and they do a 1 to 8, let's say you get Deficio and they do a 1 to 8, we could compare our lists, okay? And the difference is, Jat might disagree. He might think, actually, you know what, I think that you ranked, let's say Flash Wolves too low. Maybe you should have ranked them above IG, for example. I don't know, I'm just picking a random example. And then let's say Freak says, right, well, I actually think that I actually think that in the way it works out that Coup is better than KT, and that's the reason they made it on circuit point. So I'm going to pick Coup to go above KT there. And let's say Monty says, right, well, I actually think that you're not giving H2K enough credit there, and I'm going to have H2K above AHQ. The difference is, you notice these are all reasonably slight differences. Their differences might be the difference between 1 or 2 slots. Let's say they go crazy, and we're talking about 2 or 3 spots difference. What will never happen is I say that my best team in the group is KT in Pool 2. What will never happen is Jat, Freak, Monty, or Froskurin or Deficio. They will never say, oh, actually, I think KT are the 8th best team in that group. And I actually think that I actually think that H2K are the best team in Pool 2. They will never say that. Experts would never get that far apart and that wrong. And yet, that's what this random system allows. It allows KT to be picked, yes, number one, or it allows HGK to be picked number one. That's the way the system works. So the analogy I always give is if I had written out my list of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, again, we could debate over which way it was, but say Deficio knocked the table with his elbow, and was like, oh, fuck Denmark, what the fuck? Then when they all fell on the floor, if Jack then picked them all up, here, I'll help you with that. As he picked them all up, if Freak just leaned in and said, you know what, let's just use those seedings. And then Jack goes, what do you mean? I wasn't seeding, I was just picking them up in any order. And he goes, yeah, let's just use that seeding. Then everyone would be like, well, no, that's not even seeding though, is it? That's just random. You just pick them up. Like, there's no rhyme or reason to that. Whatever I picked up first, coincidentally, that's exactly what this system does with the pools. Within the pools, it's random in that sense. And as a result, it is almost, by definition, the worst system. Now, it's not in as much as you could have a fluke where it did come out my 1 to 8 style in terms of where they got seeded, except for the regional aspect, which is a problem. You could have it as a fluke but you could also, as a fluke, have the worst possible system. You can have many scenarios in between that's much less than ideal. So it's the worst system in as much as how absolutely arbitrary and abstract and random it is. It's not the worst system in as much as it's not literally purposely taking them, doing them 1 to 8, then flipping them and saying, fuck you, 8 will be number 1. But that can happen within it. So it contains the potential for the worst system possible within how it's set up. Now, there's also the issue of the region issues, which is, and I have a way you can get around the region issues, and it gets around a lot of these problems as well, which is I think you should go more towards something like TI5, the international. So in the international, they have less groups, they have 2 groups, and they play more, and you play more opponents. So in the international 5, there were 2 groups of 8 teams, and you play a best of 2 against everyone, and you just play the best of 2 in a row. It's not like double round robin. You play the best of 2 and you get the 3 points, the 1 point, all that shit. So in this sort of a scenario, you wouldn't need to region lock people like, if you were in this region, you can't play with another one. Because again, you'd see this based on the number, on the quality of the teams. And as a result, you play so many opponents. It doesn't matter if you have another team from China in your group, which you would do in the system anyway. You're going to play so many opponents that even when you go out, you get to play plenty of games, get plenty of opportunity. And if the 2 groups are seeded reasonably well, you get extremely fair tournament system. So in the TI system, you actually got to play 14 games, so 7 best of 2s, even if you went out of the tournament in last place. And that's very reasonable. And TI5 is running way less time than Worlds. So if you did it reasonably in terms of how you spread it out, you could even make it work within the month that Worlds lasts, because TI5 lasts about half as long. So I even think that's a much better system and gets past a lot of these issues that, again, are self-created. The idea that it has to be uniform where the seeds are relative to that region, then you can't have 2 teams from the same region. So I think there's a lot of problems with the Worlds format. And even if it doesn't end up happening this time, I mean, it happened last year with TSM getting that ridiculous group because they were the number 1 seed, and as a result, they didn't get a Korean team in their group. And they got, in theory, yes, the number 2 team in theory from China, but overall, there was debates as to whether that was the case. So I think this will be a much better system if they iron some of these issues out, went back to the planning stage of what the paradigm is, rethought their assumptions and premises, and then go forwards and design a nuanced, complicated, in-depth, intricate system that such a great tournament is worthy of, because it can be a great tournament. It probably will have great matches and be one of the great tournaments, but it could be better, and by designing it better at the fundamental stage, you will in general set the stage to reveal better matches and stuff on average. Now, thanks to Alpha Draft for sponsoring this podcast and paying me all that dirty, fat, sick money. Ship the bread to Fred, Alpha Draft. Holla, holla, get them dollars. I will. If you want to support Alpha Draft or play there, because they offer fantasy esports such as League of Legends, I assume they'll have the World Championship. They've had many past tournaments, LCK, LPL, EU LCS, NA LCS, NA Challenger, EU Challenger. They'll have their tournaments where you make your team and you enter into certain contests, and the contests run all scales of money. You can have ones for like 50 cents, you can have one for $1, $5, $10 entry, and as a result, the scale of how much you win goes up, and they have some where they have massive fields and you can win an incredibly high first prize for a low entry. They have some that are small ones. You can even do 1v1 tournaments where you just both pay the same amount, then one of you wins like, I don't know, like 90% of the prize pool or something. People win tens of thousands every week who are really good at this. It's fun anyway, and you can play very low levels if you don't want to put much up in. But if you think you're really good, you think you know what you're talking about, you've got the bankroll, play the $10 ones, potentially win thousands, the millions in terms of prize pool given away over the year. alphadraft.com, link in the description box below if you'd like to.